So I am Lindsay Garrett. I am a post-adoption specialist here at Gladney, and I have worked in the adoption field, working with families preparing to adopt and families after their adoptions for 10 years now. And I recently wrote a book called Parent Goals, The Millennials Guide to New Parent Preparedness, that is geared towards new parents and expecting parents. And the information that we're going to talk about today is from my book, is a section of my book talking specifically about reflecting on your discipline and parenting styles and creating an intentional plan for that. I think this topic is good for new parents, or a good refresher for experienced parents, also for professionals who are working with parents and helping them explore these things. So I'm going to go ahead and let you know. You can see what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about parenting styles, discipline strategies, and helping develop your own mission statement and values. I am not going to teach you how to discipline children today. This is a guide of reflecting on your own history, reflecting on what you want to accomplish when it comes to discipline with your children, and then setting some big picture guides for that. And the philosophy behind most of my work with parents is giving you information and then letting you decide what works for you, because each family is different, each child is different. There's not a one size fits all. So if you came here today hoping that I would give you some magic discipline technique that would make your child comply with everything you say, I apologize that I'm not a magic person who can do that. I don't think anyone is. That's what makes parenting challenging and frustrating, and sometimes a little bit fun when you put the puzzle pieces together and it works out. So let's jump right in. You can feel free to do questions in the chat, and we're going to have some participation. And we'll utilize the chat for that as well. A few notes on how to use this training. Use it in whatever way works for you. If you think something I say is dumb and doesn't apply to you and you don't want to do it, then don't do it. If you don't like an activity or you don't think it's useful for you, don't do it. I will never know if you do not do any of the things that we talk about. So take what works for you, leave the rest, and fit it into your life however is helpful for you. Jumping into this topic, this is kind of the mindset I want to have. You know your family and your children best, or if you're a professional, you know the families you work with and your population best. So do what works for your people. And I want to go in with this mindset today of taking a minute to set aside your thoughts about what discipline should be, or what you see other people do, or what you see on the internet, or what all the hundreds of experts out there have told you what to do, and really focus and reflect on your family and your child. So setting aside our shoulds for the next hour and focusing on the specific needs of the family in front of you. All right, that being said, we're going to do a little activity to help us let go of those shoulds and get them all out of our brain. So I want you guys to type in the chat what comes to mind when you see this phrase. Discipline is. What is discipline? And I'll read them out loud as we go. Teaching, correction, redirection. Oh, you guys are so good. Accountability, redemptive, structure, steps, training, positive or negative feedback on behavior, guidance, meeting them where they are. We have a lot of connected parenting people in here. Love it. Okay. Showing them how not to do things. goals. All right, so discipline is a lot of things. It's not simple, it's complicated. Learning, equipping, empowering with healthy choices and consequences, expectations, love. Love that. Okay, thank you for participating, even though I told you didn't have to. It's more fun if you do that. So a lot of words about what discipline is. And really, this is the crux of what we're going to talk about today. So your discipline strategy isn't just correcting your child when they do something wrong. In the moment, a lot of times it may be, but it is also much bigger than that. It's intentionally thinking about how you want to manage boundaries, what values you want to teach your children, and what's important to you in your relationship with your child. So we're going to kind of zoom out a bit today from talking about the nitty-gritty of daily strategies and interactions to that bigger picture of what are we trying to, when we use those strategies or when we interact with our kids, what are we trying to do? What do I want to accomplish with this? And then you guys already said this because you are so smart and know this already. So discipline is compiled of a lot of things. It is you and your partner's histories and how you apply your experience being parented to your parenting. It is the skills, behaviors, and characteristics that you choose to instill in your child or children. And it's also an umbrella term that encompasses your guiding parenting philosophy and strategy. It's not just, those specific strategies of correcting or teaching that you use day to day. So when I talk about discipline, this is what I mean throughout our presentation today. As part of my research for my book, I interviewed about 50 parents, and one of the questions that I asked was, how did you choose discipline strategies? And the answers shook out into 4 different things. I had people who did what their parents did when they were growing up, people who did what other people they knew did, whether that was their siblings, their friends, their cousins, people they saw, and then people who did a lot of research and training and then applied those things. And then finally, people who did just trial and error. They tried things. If they worked, they kept them. If they didn't work, they switched to something else. So these are kind of the ways that you can choose discipline strategies. These are the areas you can pull from. And no matter where you pull strategies from, we're all going to do the last one, trial and error, because as I said, every child is different, every family is different. And about the time that you figure out what works for your kid, they evolve and then you start all over with figuring it out. So parenting is constant trial and error of this worked, great, keep it. This did not work. Let's change it. Let's do something different until we find something else that works, and then rinse and repeat. It's super fun, right? So I'm going to tell a little story from my own experience as a child and a parent to illustrate how we bring our own histories in. Because in any parenting discussion or discipline discussion, it's important to start with you, because we all bring our own histories to our interactions with our clients and with our children. And being aware of that is important so that we know when our history has kind of taken over and is driving the bus. Because some of our histories are great and some of our histories might be not so great. And the goal is to be able to discern what is helpful to you and what is not helpful to you, and choose intentionally what you want to apply. So this is from my own experience. When my oldest was about 6 or 7 months old, my husband and I were doing the regular bedtime routine of putting her in PJs and reading stories and doing a nightly bottle and all those things you do with the baby that age. and we were changing her out of her clothes and putting her in pajamas. And I raised my arms above my head and said to her, "Skin the rabbit," to indicate that she was supposed to raise her arms above her head so we could take her shirt off. And I just said this. I didn't think about it. It just reflex came out of my mouth. And after a few seconds, my husband kind of stopped in the middle of our bedtime routine and was like, "What did you just say?" And I was like, "Skin the rabbit, like it means to raise your hands." And he was like, "What? I'm sorry, I've never heard that before. What does that mean?" And I was like, "It means it's supposed to tell the kid to like raise their hands above their head so you can peel their shirt off like you would peel the skin off a dead rabbit." "Oh, gross. No, yeah, no, I don't like that." It was something that I had never thought about before, that my mom had always said to me and was a thing in my family. And I just said it, not thinking about it. And when my husband asked, I finally thought like, "Oh, what does that actually mean?" And realized that's not really a phrase that I want to use with my child. So I had to intentionally switch from saying "skin the rabbit," because that was what was coded in my brain, to saying "arms up" instead. And I actually went back and asked my mom, "Where did this phrase come from? It's kind of weird." And she said, "I don't know. My mom always said it to me." So here I am, third generation of using this phrase that's kind of gross and referencing skinning a dead animal. And if I had never stopped to think about it, or if my husband hadn't pointed it out, I probably would have just continued it on, and then my child would have said it to their children. So a little bit of a lighthearted anecdote, but a good example of I had to actually intentionally stop saying that and train myself to say something different because I wanted to make that change. I'm not a hunter, Tisha. I don't know where it came from. Has anyone else ever heard this phrase? I'm curious if it's unique to my family. I like to pretend it's from like Little House on the Prairie times when maybe it was relevant, but I have no idea where it came. Skin the cat. Okay. Thank you. I am not alone. I appreciate this. Thank you, Nancy. All right. So this example is we do what we know. And what we know for most of us, if we've not done formal training or reflecting, is what we experienced when we were kids. So one of the worksheets that you guys have is called Discipline Planning Strategies. And it will kind of guide you through what reflecting on how you were parented, if you like those strategies, or if you want to think of new ones. And that you can start jotting those down now as we talk, or you can save it for later, or you can never download it and we'll never know. Well, Nancy might know, I won't know. All right. And then in the same vein of our history, I like to introduce the concept of shark music. Has anybody heard of shark music before? No. Shark music is one of my favorite things to talk about with parents. It's a really fun phrase. It's easy to remember. It refers to the like Jaws theme song, the like dun 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 that everybody associates with fear in that movie. And it basically is when an interaction with your child triggers a fear reaction in you as a parent. So that might be something that's tied to your own history. Maybe your child is doing something that was not acceptable when you were a child. And so you're having an emotional response to that. Or it might be because you've experienced something with your child. For example, if your child, fell out of a tree and broke their arm, then you're probably going to feel more anxiety from then on every time they climb a tree because something scary happened in that experience previously. So it's important to be aware of what causes our shark music, because a lot of times if it's connected, especially to something from our history, it's a false alarm. It may not be an actual alarm that something dangerous is happening. It might just be something our brains and our bodies have learned from when we were children. And being aware of this is important because if we parent from a place of fear, we're not being intentional. We're letting our fear brains hijack us in our interactions with our children instead of parenting from a place of regulation and being calm and being intentional in how we want to interact with our children. So that is shark music in a nutshell. Shark music is a concept created by Circle of Security. I will type that in the chat. They have some great videos on YouTube and a whole book that talks about attachment and shark music if you're interested in learning more about this concept. All right. So a couple of questions to reflect on. And if you guys will humor me and maybe type in the chat, like what triggers shark music for you when you interact with children? I know one of the things that triggers it for me is messes, especially if it's like a sudden mess. Screaming, whew, that's a good one. Loud noises, also hard. Arguing. Jessica has more than one kid. Repetitive noises. Backtalk, disrespect. Yep, that's a big one. Sudden quietness. I like that one. Sensory overload. Oh, spitting. Yes, spitting is just instant rage for me. Coughing, loud noises. The word hate. Interesting. Too much small talk. Wheezing. All right, you guys know. Get out when your child physically lashes out. Yep. And then taking that a step further, if you think about when you experience those triggers, that shark music, how does your body react? What does your body feel in the moment? I know sometimes I get like a rush of heat, like up to my head, or my heart starts beating faster. Or I start getting racing thoughts. Hair standing up, yeah. Headache. Tense, sweating. Nausea, interesting. Shaking. Clenched fist. Clenched fist. That is a hard thing to say out loud for some reason. Good. Well, this is great. Thank you guys for reflecting and participating. So another handout that you guys have that's titled Shark Music helps kind of guide you through this. If you're seeing these answers and you're like, I don't really know what my triggers are, or I know what pisses me off when my kid does it, but I never really paid attention to how my body reacts in the moment. That worksheet can help kind of guide you through what are the things that are triggering for you and how does your body react in the moment, because being aware of both of these things helps give yourself more grace, because like this is hard for me as a parent and I need to pay attention to it. And then if you can recognize how your body reacts in the moment, you can reflect on what your body needs to help you calm down and eventually start regulating yourself when you experience those triggers. All right, thank you guys for sharing. All moving on, switching gears from talking about our histories and our triggers, because we can talk about that all day, but we only have an hour, to talking about parenting mission statements. So I was introduced to the concept of a parenting mission statement in a connected parenting training with a therapist named Marshall Lyles, who is an amazing play therapist and an adoptive parent. If you ever have an opportunity to attend a training or read any of his material, he is wonderful. And the goal of a parenting mission statement is really to think about bigger picture. What am I trying to accomplish in my parenting? We so often get stuck in the day-to-day rigmarole of parenting kids because it's what's right in front of us and it's the fires that we have to put out right now. And often we don't take a step back to think about that bigger picture of what long-term, what am I actually wanting out of my parenting? What am I working towards? What am I putting all of my energy and efforts into? And what are my goals and my visions for my family and my kids? So we're going to work today on developing a mission statement, and I'm going to guide you through that. It can include two things. So one, a big all-encompassing statement that gives a theme for how you plan to parent, and then breaking that down into a short list of practical things that are important to your family when it comes to parenting. And you have a worksheet that goes along with this. It is the mission statement and values worksheet. So you can follow along and fill that out as we go, or you can save it for later and, think and reflect on it and use it down the road, or you can never download it and never look at it. Up to you. Okay. So here's an example of a mission statement. This is the mission statement that I created for my family and my child. And so this is an overarching theme. So mine is to be the best guide for my child as they discover who they are, what they love, and how to become a functioning adult. So that's the overall theme. It's very similar to a mission statement for a nonprofit or an organization, which a lot of us are familiar with. And then underneath that came up with specific values that kind of more guide my day-to-day interactions with my child. So for me, those are encouraging independent exploration and play. Don't do a lot of directing play in my household. My kiddos are still pretty small. My oldest is 4. So we leave a lot of time for independent play, exploring, having open-ended toys, spending a lot of time outside, and not, being in their space all the time, directing their play or trying to structure every single moment of their day. Another one for us is developing life skills. So that is, learning how to help out around the house, learning how to take care of your own things, learning how to, take your dishes to the sink, and eventually growing to learn to do your own laundry and know how to clean things and cook things. And that's something that we started very early with our kids and will continue to build on as we go, because it's important to my husband and I as parents that when our children leave our house, they have all the necessary life skills to do most things on their own. And that starts with us teaching them now. Developing identity. It is a value for us of not really boxing our kiddos into what we think their identity might be, or what we think, a typical girl might be interested in, or a boy might be interested in. We have a large variety of toys in my household that are geared towards both genders, a lot of gender neutral things, and we follow our children's lead and what they're interested in. My 4-year-old right now is really into Frozen, which I feel like is like a state requirement for every 3-4-year-old, and superhero TV shows, Spider-Man, PJ Masks. There are a bunch of superhero TV shows. So that's, what we talk about. That's the music we listen to. That's what we play when we play pretend. We kind of follow their lead on that. And then the last one is having healthy sleep habits. This is for my kids because they need sleep to function well, but also I know that for myself as a parent, I need a lot of rest to function well. And so we are pretty rigid and structured around like not skipping naps, going to bed at a certain time, and not really deviating from that routine very often. That's something that's important to us. So this is just an example. You're going to choose what works best for your family and what fits your family. If we're talking about values, I encourage you to try and keep it under 5 things because, very easily this list could get very big and it is unrealistic that you're going to be able to do it all. So these are kind of like the top things that are really important to you. And what this accomplishes is basically a filter for you to run through your parenting decisions. The world tells us that everything is important when it comes to our kids. We should do everything well. If we don't get them, the best toys when they're little, then their brains aren't going to develop in the right way. If we don't hand make their baby food from organic, farm to table ingredients, they're not going to grow and they're going to be super picky eaters when they get older. If we don't get them into the best school or get them involved in extracurricular activities right away, they're not going to get a good education, or they're not going to, be like a pro sports player. You can tell sports are not important in my family. I don't even know the words. But the world tries to convince us that everything is important. And it's just not possible for everything to be important. We will run ourselves ragged if we try to make everything important. And the goal of coming up with a mission and values for your family is to choose what's important for you, using that as a filter to help you identify, okay, this is something that I'm really going to focus on and is very important to me, versus this is something that I don't really care that much about and I can kind of do mediocre or not worry about it all. And then when something comes up, you can choose whether you're going to add that to your list of what's important, or whether it's not going to be something that you add to your list and you don't have to worry about. An example from my own values in parenting, you'll notice on my list back here that I talked through, there's nothing on here about food. And food is an area I would like to be very clear. I feed my children, and I try to get them to eat a variety of food, but anyone here who has children knows that you can try and feed them homemade gourmet meals and do all the little shapes and the cutesy things, and there are kids who just aren't going to eat that. So that is an area where I'm not pouring in a ton of effort and energy. I feed my kids. I don't worry too much about if they eat it or not. I am not planning elaborate menus. I'm not cooking things specifically for them. I am, giving them food and snacks and feeling comfortable that their bodies are going to grow. And that hopefully a doctor will tell me if something nutritionally is wrong with them. That's just an area that's not super important to me as a parent. So I can kind of let that go, or not worry about it as much and not expend a whole lot of energy on that. There are other families where that's really important to them. Maybe you're a family where cooking is just really integrated into your identity and is how you maybe express your love for your kids or the people in your family. Or exploring food together is something that's really important, and you really want to expose your children to a variety of different foods. That is fantastic and okay. And you can add that to your list of values if it's important to your family. Okay. We had a couple questions come in, so I'm going to try and answer those real quick before we move on. One of them is a mission statement still relevant or helpful to parents who have teens that are on the cusp of early adulthood? I work with families whose kids are involved in the juvenile justice system, and there's a lot of expression feeling hopeless. Is it too late to help my child? That is a great question. Obviously, the longer we have to work with a child, the more opportunity we kind of have to shape and guide them. But I would say yes. Making a mission statement also needs to be realistic for what you're working with your child right now. So if you have a 16 or 17-year-old, your mission statement might be to teach my child how to function safely in the world, or to teach my child life skills so that they're able to function in the world when they leave my home in a couple of years. Or to build a safe space so that my older child feels okay coming back to me for help, even when they don't live with me anymore. This is completely unique to you and your family. So meeting your child where they are, meeting your family where they are, and this also evolves over time. My mission statement now, I said my kids are young. This might be relevant throughout their entire life, but probably not, because kids evolve and change so much. So I'm going to alter it as my child grows. When it's no longer relevant, I'm going to reevaluate and course correct and decide what is relevant now. What do I need to be functioning? What do I need to be focusing on as a parent now? And alter that and evaluate it as we go. That is a great question. Thank you. All right. If everything I just talked about with coming up with a whole mission statement and like specific things to focus on is way too complicated for you, and you're just sitting here thinking, Lindsay, I'm never going to do that. It sounds like a lot of work. Totally fine. There is a different way that you can accomplish something similar without getting into kind of the nitty-gritty specifics. And that would be what I call simplified values. So that's choosing just a couple of words, 2 to 3, that are word themes to help you accomplish something similar, giving you a filter to run things through, giving you kind of an overall theme for how you're parenting or how you want your family to function, but without coming up with super specific things. So these are just umbrella words that can be umbrella words that other things can fall under. It's not going to cover every single thing that you care about as a parent, but just some highlights of what's important to you. And so this is a giant list of words that could get you started. And I believe these are in your mission statement and values handout as well. So reflecting on what words pop out to you, what feels right for you, what resonates with you. You can start by reflecting on this, maybe circling 5, try to circle 5, and then think about narrowing that down to ideally 2, maybe 3. If you get too many, you're just not going to do it. It becomes too broad. So you really want to hone in on what specifically is important to you. And I use myself as an example of how we use this. So I've done this activity and kind of reflected on what's important to me. And these are the 2 words I came up with. And I expanded on them because I'm a writer and I can't just choose one word. I have to have all the words. And these are the values that I chose for myself in my parenting. The first one is integrity, choosing what's right over what is easy, and sticking to my word is kind of how I flesh that out. And then the second one is creativity, being curious and following my whims and exploring new ideas and inspiration. So these are the things that work for me as a parent. This encompasses me, making intentional discipline decisions, thinking about the long game versus the short game. So many times as a parent, especially with small children right now, I just want to do the path of least resistance. But a lot of times that long term is not what is going to be most helpful for me and for my child. So choosing what is right for me and my child over what might be easiest in the moment. I will reiterate, I'm not a perfect parent, and this often depends on the day of how well I can do this. And then creativity is one of my values, because I have found that when I feel like I'm doing really well as a parent, when I'm rested and have gotten my self-care and have gotten some breaks and feel like I'm kind of at the top of my parenting game, I find myself being more creative. I find myself making up games or, wanting to do a craft with my child or wanting to go explore something new. That is really when my creativity comes out. And I like that about myself as a parent. So setting this as a value gives me a goal of being more creative in my parenting, because that's the type of parent I want to be. What this also helps me do is recognize when I'm not where I want to be as a parent. So when I am stressed out or sleep deprived or hungry or grumpy, I don't do these things. I tend to, choose the easy decision in the moment because I just don't have the energy sometimes to do the hard one. I tend to not be creative. I tend to use a lot more screen time. I think we all do that when we need a break. So it helps me kind of recognize when I am stressed or struggling as a parent. And that is an indication usually for me that I need a break, or I need to practice more self-care, or I just need to kind of reflect on what's going on and why I've strayed away from these values that I want to strive towards as a parent. So simplified version, if you don't want to get into the whole mission statement and then specific values. So you guys already have this worksheet. Again, you could have done it as we go. You can save it or print it and think about it later, or you can never look at it. Up to you. All right. So you've outlined your mission statement and your values, and how do you apply it? So if you've defined what your mission statement is and what your family values are, then choosing your battles, because we all have to choose our battles as parents, means deciding what's important enough to take a stand on and where you can be more flexible in your parenting. So going back for me, choosing my battles, I am going to advocate for healthy sleep habits and sticking with that most of the time. I know parents who their family functions well on a way more flexible routine. Their kids nap sometimes and they don't nap other times, and everything's okay. That just doesn't work for me. So that's not something I'm going to negotiate on. But I'm trying to think of something that might be a battle that I would not choose. I'm not going to battle my kid over what they want to wear. They can choose what they want to wear. I don't care if it matches. I don't care if their shoes are on the wrong feet, as long as they're comfortable and they can function well. The caveat to that for me is I buy most of their clothes. So I do have a bit of control over that, but it's not something that is super important to me. And that's not a battle that I want to enter in with my kids most of the time. So that's not a battle I'm going to pick. That's not a battle I'm going to pick. That might be different for you. It might be really important to you. How your child presents themselves to the world. You might have a child that goes to a school where they have to dress a certain way. For whatever reason, that might be a battle that you're going to enter into and advocate for. But the goal is for you not to do that with everything, because we can't. We will burn out so fast if we try to go to the mat on every single thing. And then our values are our guideposts for when we're trying to decide if something is worth worrying about. I know so often for me, social media really affects this. I think if you're on Instagram, there is an expert for everything, especially if you're a new parent. There are food experts. There are sleep experts. There are toddler experts. There are play experts. There are education experts. There's an quote unquote expert for everything. And it's really easy to get caught up in, okay, well, this person is, creating like very creative structured activities for their kids every day. Like, oh, they have a craft every morning, and then they do an art project in the afternoon, and they're doing all these STEM activities. Is that something I should be doing with my kids? I have those thoughts all the time, like, oh, that looks cool. Should I be doing that as a parent? Like, is that something I want to do with my kids? And I can go back to my values, and that helps me decide yes or no. This is a good example for me because one of my values is independent play and exploration, and all of that play structure. I get sucked into it every once in a while. I'm like, this sounds great, let's do it. And I will try it. And half the time my kid hates it, or it's like 30 minutes of setup and then like 5 minutes of actual activity. So it's not worth it. And I found that our family just works so much better with independent play and letting my children decide what they're interested in and what they want to do versus me setting up activities for them. So that's a good reminder for me when I get sucked into that social media world of, is this something I should be doing as a parent? Of going back to my values and my mission statement and reminding myself, you know what? No, that's not what's important to me specifically. Or maybe going back to them and saying, you know what? I think this is important to me. I want to add this to my list. And depending on how many things I have on that list, it might mean that it's going to supersede something else. I'm gonna have to cut something in order to add this because everything can't be important. And if the list gets too big, then it's not going to be realistic that I'm going to be able to adhere to it. So it helps you kind of discern, is this something I can let go or do mediocrely? Or is this something that I want to add to my list? All right. And then we're kind of running ahead of the game today, which is nice. I like to end with a little parenting pep talk, and then we'll go into Q&As if you guys have examples or questions specifically about developing values, mission statements, or if you want to share your experiences. Because I feel like the world criticizes us so much as parents. It's so easy to judge someone and not know their full story. So being here today, attending a training about parenting and developing values and guides for your family or your clients is amazing. Your willingness to do that, to explore your own history, what you bring to the table as a professional or as a parent, is only going to benefit your child, deepen your relationship with them or with your clients, and help them do that for their children. And you have the ability to choose how you want to teach your child and determine the values you want to focus on. The world doesn't decide that. You can decide that. And your family and your child or your clients, if you're a professional, you know them best. You are the expert about your own child or your own family or your own work. The outside world doesn't know the ins and outs of what goes on in your family or your child's needs or their personality or what works for them and what doesn't. You know that. And so I want to empower you to choose what works for your family. Let the rest of it go. Half the time, nobody's going to even know. It's okay. You already know what works. This is an old slide. Please ignore this. Please ignore this picture. If you are interested, if you like this material, I'm going to delete this because it's going to bother me. If you like this material and you're interested in learning more, this is my book, Parent Goals, Millennials Guide to New Parent Preparedness. Discipline and Values is one chapter in the book. I also cover things like divvying up roles with your parenting partner, creating a support system for yourself as parents in that transition, going through attachment styles, learning about those and how those factor into parenting, exploring your fears around parenthood, talking about how your relationship develops and how to maintain connection as a couple in the transition to parenthood. So if you are a new parent, if you're an expecting parent, if you work with new or expecting parents, if you know someone who's planning to become a parent in the near future, this is a great book for them to help guide them and prepare themselves as parents emotionally and practically for that transition. Our world focuses so much on the baby, and my passion is really for parents and helping them feel prepared. And then if you want to follow me on Instagram, that's my Instagram handle. And then you can visit my website for articles, blog posts, free handouts. The information that we talked about today is going to be up there in a free download packet if you want to refresh and read through it later on or share it with your clients. That will be available to you. Thanks for coming and listening to me. Who has questions? We are running ahead of schedule. Questions about any of the things we talked about? I'm not seeing anything come through on the chat. So everyone is now an expert in mission statements and parenting values. And we're all going to do it so well moving forward. Not really. We're all going to make mistakes and then give ourselves grace for our mistakes because no one is perfect. And maybe take a few things that we learned today and make our lives easier as parents.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Oh, we do have a question that just came up.
Oh, Brittany. Yes. How do you drown out society's voices and focus on your own values? So I'm going to give my opinion on this, but other people attending the training, if you have found a way that works for you in doing this, please do share with Brittany and me, because I think this is something we all struggle with and are constantly working on as parents. Actually defining your own values, I think, would be step one, because if you don't know what your values are, you tend to kind of take on whatever someone tells you should be doing. So defining your own values so that you know what your important things are. Limiting my social media has really helped me with this. Following accounts that don't align with my values or that make me feel like I'm not doing enough as a parent has really helped me, and not spending a whole lot of time on social media. And then setting boundaries. So I feel like sometimes the most challenging people in our parenting worlds and the biggest criticizers are those close to us. Even I hear from a lot of families that grandparents are hard to navigate boundaries with, and that they get a lot of criticism from them. And that is a whole other complicated topic we could talk about. But knowing that the way you parent, especially if you're doing it differently from how you were parented, is going to be hard for your parents because they were doing the best they could in parenting you. And sometimes when we do it differently, it makes them feel like we're telling them they did it wrong. So that can be tricky to navigate with grandparents. I have found that with my parents, it has helped to provide them information and to talk about how much research has come out since we were kids. I'm a child of the 80s, so like all this brain research and even a lot of the like connected parenting and attachment research that exists now just didn't exist back then. So this information wasn't even available for our parents to know. And the internet didn't really exist, which I think is a pro and a con. You know, we have so much information at our fingertips. We can research anything we want. And our parents were likely limited to just talking to people that they knew. So knowing yourself is also important with that. I love research and information. So reading about things, researching them, and then filtering out what works for me is pretty easy. If that makes you super overwhelmed, and if everything you read makes you feel like you need to do it, then don't research things. Maybe ask a friend or a family member or your parents if you trust their opinion. And don't, solicit a bunch of information if that's going to be overwhelming for you. Self-awareness is really important. Okay, Jessica asks, what if you have different values because the other parent is from a different culture? That is tricky. If you're working with a partner on developing your values, then you guys are going to kind of have to come to an agreement. And maybe you each choose a few and then talk about them and decide on your compromises and what is both important. I will say on this, knowing the why behind it can be really helpful of why that's important to your partner. Especially, I think if there's a cultural component to it, there might be something that's really tied to their family of origin, their cultural origin, that is important for them to pass on to their kiddos. So not just talking about surface level values, what you want to do with your kids, but what's underneath that. Where is that coming from? And I have sections of my book that actually specifically guide you on that. How should you respond to grandparents when they compare your children to your siblings' children in terms of their behavior? Whew. Yeah, that's a big one. Again, if anyone's navigated this, please feel free to chime in. I think keeping that simple is probably easiest because it's not your responsibility honestly, it's not your responsibility to change their minds. It's your responsibility to do what works best for you and your family. So something simple as, okay, well, this works for our kids and our family. Like, thanks for your input. This is what works for our family. Not getting into an argument, not trying to convince them that it's the best way, just kind of straight, great. I heard the thing that you said to me, and we are still going to do this because I know my kids and I know my family and what works for us. Thanks, Jennifer. Jennifer says, I feel like I've just been learning as I go and never took the time to decide what's important for our family. I feel like so many of us have done that because when would you have taken the time? No one tells us ahead of time that this is something we should reflect on and think about before we have a kid. And then when we get the kid, we're so busy doing all the day-to-day stuff that we don't really have the time to step back and think about it.